There's a hole in that shirt. Hey whoever's out there, I go by Grumblebug and I'm currently reading My Life is an Ice Cream Sandwich by E.B. Zoboi. Today we're going to try an experiment. For context, I'm a mood reader. I might plan a couple books out at a time, like the next 1, 2, 3 books I'm going to read, but very rarely, if ever, will I actually sit down and make a list of all the books that I need to read. I am a perfectionist. I feel like assigning things to myself in that way just opens the door to put a lot of pressure on myself and let all of my hangups about, well, failure creep up, even in the most mundane and inconsequential of contexts, such as the things that I'm reading for fun. And reading's my outlet, so I don't need any of that. All this said, I really like the idea of a TBR or to be read list if you're not in the BookTube lingo game. I think using a TBR can add some structure and intentionality to reading that I, as a planner and list maker and color coder, really appreciate. And I also feel like if you're someone who just really hates making decisions, I feel like this could be helpful because it reduces the number of options you have in the moment when you need to pick up something new and don't necessarily want to think about it for a long time. So I'm going to take you along and we're going to pull one book from each of my shelves that is, I don't want to say overflowing, that's not quite accurate, but they could use some breathing room. Well, yeah, we'll go with that. And then we'll come back here and talk about them and how I want to approach this and what I picked up and all that stuff. Okay? Sound good? I hope so, because that's what we're doing.
pit stop to say hello to the puppy. Not puppy, she's like 14 years old, but she's always gonna be my puppy. Hi, sweet girl. Yeah, you gonna make a cameo? Yeah, it's a hard life, just like sleeping all the time and napping. This is what we should be doing, right? This is the actual content that people want. You my good girl. Okay, moving on. This wound up being a few more than I expected. Apparently, I didn't count how many different shelves I was pulling from, but that's okay. That's okay. There's no pressure here. This is not about pressure. This is what we wound up with. Cool. Okay. I intentionally used this as a chance to grab books that I don't think I would have otherwise been likely to reach for a while. And this is important because the way that I manage or mismanage my shelves is such that I only really buy books when I find them for cheap, or I got a coupon, or like my library's having a sale and things are really cheap, stuff like that. And so when I come across those things, I take advantage of those opportunities, which leaves me with a lot of books unread on my shelves, especially since I am an avid library user. So I always kind of have a stockpile to go to that I'm working through. And once I do read a book, I kind of sit with it for a while, and then periodically I'll go back and pull all the books that I have read and probably enjoyed, but don't necessarily see myself rereading, and I resell those. My hope is that I'll get some good reads out of here, and if I love them, awesome. I read a thing and I know that I love it. And if I read it and I don't like fall head over heels for it, or I liked it but I don't think I'll necessarily read it again, then I can let that one go and clear up some shelf space for other things. So that is my goal with this. So my nonfiction shelf pick was You Are Not a Rock by Mark Freeman. So this is a self-help book. I know nothing at all about this man's credentials, but I remember being really interested in it because if you look at the title, You Are Not a Rock, his basic premise is that a lot of times people in modern day, we try to cope with anxiety and worry and all of these really negative feelings by avoiding them, by trying to pretend we don't have them, like we are rocks with no emotions. But we're human, and all of these negative feelings are very normal. And so he stresses the fact that what is really important is not learning to cut off those emotions, which actually does more harm than good in the long run, but instead work on our emotional fitness. So building emotional resiliency and coping skills and things like that, which sounds like a very practical approach that I can really appreciate from a mental health perspective. So I'm interested in this, and I really just love the concept because, like, who hasn't been there? Who hasn't been in the pit of like worry and angst and frustration and been like, I don't want to feel the things. Emotions suck. Is that just me? No? Okay, moving on. Next up, from my sort of sci-fi spec fic and fantastical section is, and I now realize why it's sitting there in particular, The Sky Is Yours by Chandler Klang Smith. I think that, I'm gonna guess that's pronounced Klang. So this sounds like something all of its own. This is a dystopian set in a very futuristic, very tech heavy, like burned out city, like the kind where we took advantage of all the tech that we get access to, even though we maybe shouldn't have. And so life is just very hedonistic, and there's a huge divide in terms of privilege. The upper class have all the wealth, they have an obscene amount of space and luxuries, and like genetic modifications are normal and stuff like that. And then anyone who's not in that upper 1% is like screwed, basically. But then also, this city is regularly threatened by dragons. So it sounds like an interesting mix, and it sounds like we follow a trio of like new adults sort of age group who are maybe coming from that more privileged class, but then something happens and they have to go on the run. And so they're trying to escape and wind up having to go through like the seedy underbelly of what this city has become in like the lower echelons of class and privilege and stuff. So this sounds different and I'm intrigued. So the next one is Long May She Reign by Rhiannon Thomas. I have this on my fantasy shelf, I think because when I originally found it, it was categorized as fantasy, but I realize now that looking at the back cover, there's nothing that outright screams fantasy, so I don't know. Maybe this is just going to be like a historical context, except it's not, whatever. So this follows Freya, and Freya was apparently 23rd in line to the throne, and someone manages to poison the current king and all of the other 22 people in line of succession to the king, all in one fell swoop. And so the crown falls to Freya. And so it's stuck in this sort of like survivalist mystery of not knowing who to trust and who did this and are they after her next. And also she doesn't want to rule. This isn't her shtick, but like now she's in this position. So I'm curious. I'm now wondering if this is actually fantasy or not, but I guess we'll find out. It sounds like she has her own laboratory, so she's into like this world's version of science, maybe? I don't know. Whatever. I've been curious. We'll see what happens.
Hi, this is the part of the video where I start telling you about Shadowed Souls, which is an anthology of urban fantasy short stories written by a number of prominent authors from the genre. However, as I was watching the footage back, I realized that I kind of broke my own rule for this whole experiment because Shadowed Souls is something that I've reached for several times in the past couple weeks. I just haven't gotten to actually read it. So instead, I think it's going to be more appropriate for me to put Shadowed Souls back. That's what I'm pointing to. And instead, I'm going to put A Blade So Black on this list. This is a contemporary fantasy. It might also be urban fantasy, I think, and it is a retelling of Alice in Wonderland. Sounds like a really interesting concept, but I've heard some really mixed reviews about the actual plotting and story elements, and so I've been really hesitant to actually reach for it and read it. So this seems like an excellent opportunity to bring it towards the forefront of my awareness and add it to this stack.
Totally different note, we have Early Decision by Lacy Crawford. This seems September appropriate for me, I guess, with school starting back, even though it all looks very weird right now. This is apparently based on the author's own experiences, but it's fiction, as a application whisperer. So basically somebody who parents from upper class, very privileged neighborhoods and such will hire people to help their child craft the perfect application to get them into like an Ivy League school. And this follows this woman's experience doing this job and working with 5 students in particular as they write their personal essays and things like that. And so we're getting a lot from these students' experiences. It sounds like there's also a lot of look at parenting and helicopter parenting and privileged parenting, which I'm really interested about. I have a lot of conversations with one of my good friends about our education system and how interesting it is And in particular, how things like college acceptances, there's such a broad gap between who has access to what resources in order to put their best foot forward in that process, and it can have so many ripple effects on their life. Fascinating topic, so I'm curious to see how this looks at that conversation. Also in the school theme, we have Prep by Curtis Sittenfeld. This is my best friend's favorite book, so I'm hoping that I love it too. This is the story of a girl who's attending an exclusive prep school, and if I understand correctly, I think this student in particular is a scholarship student. She comes from a low-income family, and so she's sort of in this in-between place. She's learning to fit into this world that is very different from the one that she has grown up in, and it looks at her experiences, it seems like across all 4 years of high school, in this vacuum of teenage angst. So we'll see. I'm curious. This will be interesting. Next up we have A Good Neighbor by Therese and Fowler. This clearly was a book of the month pick a while back. March of 2020. This wasn't that far back. Okay, I feel less bad now. So this is looking at a suburban neighborhood in North Carolina, I think it said, and it's looking at the interactions between two families. One, it seems like, has lived there for a while. We have a woman who lives there with her son. The woman is a widow, son is biracial, and he is apparently a great student, getting ready to go have a bright, shining future at college. A new family moves in next door, and it sounds like they're one of those examples of sort of like the American dream. Like they've moved up in terms of socioeconomic status from like what would be considered lower class to upper middle class. They've come into a lot of money. Now they're really enjoying living in this different social strata that the parents didn't grow up with. And apparently the son from first family and the daughter from second family who moved in start falling for each other. And this causes issues between the parents. And it sounds like this looks at all kinds of things like race and class and how those things interact with modern day social settings. So I'm curious. Sounds like it's right up my alley. And the last one I grabbed was The Dirty Book Club, which I think is going to be very much like a fluffy contemporary. I'm not reading anything that's explicitly, well, she's got a boyfriend, so I guess there's romance. But basically our protagonist moves to California with her boyfriend, and she knows no one there, and so she's kind of isolated and starting from scratch. And she has an elderly neighbor who suddenly up and moves to Europe. And as a goodbye present, the neighbor leaves with the protagonist an invitation to join an erotic book club. And so the protagonist gets to know the other members of this book club, and I'm sure there's like talk about their lives and learning to write their own stories and like all that jazz. So I'm hoping this is cute. So in addition to that stack, I also have just a couple other things that weren't on my shelves, but I know that I want to read. And those include Raising Our Hands by Jenna Arnold. I've already talked about this. I need to read this because I got it as an ARC, so I need to read and review because like I agreed to that, and I just need to make it happen. I've been struggling just because I am a little skeptical about where the author's coming from and the perspective that we're going to get here. This is a book about basically the fact that white middle class women have an incredible amount of social and political and economic capital that we don't use in pursuit of social justice. And this is theoretically looking at why that is and also how to start that process, which is an important conversation. But personally, there are a lot of other books out there right now that I'm more immediately interested in just based on the voices that they're amplifying and the perspectives that they share. But I need to do this, so hopefully I'll read this in September. Similar situation, I got another ARC recently. This just came out in August, apparently. I just got this last month. Also from a Goodreads giveaway, and that is Why Visit America? And this is a short story collection by Matthew Baker. I have no idea what I'm getting into with this, but it sounds like it's a set of short stories that revolve around a parallel America, like the United States in a parallel universe. And it sounds like it's kind of playing up things in a satirical kind of way and using that to discuss the realities of modern America, we'll see. The main story that they talk about on the back is it starts with Texas seceding from the United States and then calling itself America because apparently people think that's funny. And then they invite their neighbors in America to visit them in America. I have no idea how this is gonna go, but it's an arc. I need to read and review it. And then the last thing that I definitely will be reading in September, because I have to, is the DSM, edition 5, hashtag grad school. This is the shot I'm supposed to take, right? And then I guess we'll also toss on, and this is making me nervous for a lot of reasons, and I'm not putting the DSM up there. So, I'm not going to call this my TBR. I know, I lied to you in the title, but roll with it, okay? Like I said, I have issues with turning my... Nope, putting this down. Crisis averted. I have issues with turning my outlet into a thing that contains a to-do list. It's something that I'm trying to be very careful about as I do this whole BookTube thing. I'll borrow a phrase from Books with Shay. Okay, I love her channel. And she talks about books that are on her radar, and I love that. So that's what these are. These books are on my radar. I'm gonna call it my September prospects. Maybe I'll put that in the title. So these are kind of the extra books that I want to draw my attention to this month, but they won't be the be all end all of what I expect to read. I will not get to all of these. And I also know that I will read a lot of other things. Among them, hopefully a bunch of library books. But this will be my way of keeping a balance between things that I'm really excited about now and so pick up without any extra motivation versus things that I have been excited about. That's why they're on my shelves in the first place, but they've been hanging out for a while and I need them to move along in my process. So that's what I'm working with. You might see some of these in my September wrap-ups. You should definitely see some of them here since I actually have to read them. Oh, book club! I also need to read Unsheltered by Barbara Kingsolver. I have to read that one because it's our September book club pick. Crap! As I said, you should definitely see some of these on my September wrap-up videos since I actually have to read them for things. Not the DSM though. I will not be reviewing the DSM-5. I'm not doing that to anybody. But maybe I'll also do a check-in video at the end of the month, specifically looking back at how I did on these. I don't know. We'll see. Is that interesting to anybody? Let me know. Before I leave you, I do, of course, have another question for you. If you use a TBR list, how do you go about making it? Is it just whatever you're excited about that month? Do you have set goals that you work toward each month and use your TBR to, like, work at those accountability-wise? Or are you just a mood reader like I am and you're questioning why I would ever do this to myself? I'm not really sure either, but we're gonna try it. Let me know what you think down in the comments. So this was a little chaotic, more so than my normal videos, but it's fine. I'm gonna say it's fine. This is all a giant experiment. Either way, thanks so much for hanging out. I hope you read something great today, and I will see you when I see you.